Emma Carter had spent 3 years hiding the truth. To everyone around her, she looked like an ordinary woman. She drove a 5-year-old SUV. She wore simple clothes from local boutiques. She worked remotely, telling everyone she was a business consultant. No designer handbags. No private jets. No bodyguards. That was exactly how she wanted it. What nobody knew, not even her husband, Daniel's parents, was that Emma owned Carter Global Holdings, a multinational investment company valued at over $2.1 billion. She had inherited part of it from her grandfather and spent the last decade quietly turning it into one of America's fastest-growing private companies. She had promised herself one thing. If someone loves me, they'll love me before they know what I own. Daniel had done exactly that. They met in a neighborhood coffee shop. He never asked about her income. Never cared about expensive gifts. He loved her kindness, her humor, and her honesty. Emma believed she'd found her forever. Unfortunately, his parents were another story. Margaret and Richard Thompson came from old money. They constantly reminded everyone about their family's reputation. At every dinner, Margaret found a way to criticize Emma. "So, when are you planning to get a real career? You really should dress more appropriately. I just don't understand what Daniel sees." Emma smiled through every insult. Daniel always defended her. But Margaret wasn't finished. One Sunday afternoon, the entire family gathered at their country club. Margaret stood up holding a thick envelope. "I think it's time we protect our son's future." Emma looked confused. "What do you mean?" Margaret slid the envelope across the table. "A postnuptial agreement." Richard folded his arms. "If you truly love Daniel, you'll sign it." The room went silent. Emma slowly opened the document. Her eyes scanned page after page. If they divorced, she would walk away with absolutely nothing. No shared assets. No compensation. Nothing. Margaret leaned back with a smug smile. "We simply don't trust women who marry into wealthy families." Then she looked Emma directly in the eyes. "Especially gold diggers." Emma closed the folder, smiled calmly, and said 5 words that made everyone stare. "I'll sign, with one condition." The room fell silent. Margaret's confident smile widened. "I knew you'd make the right choice," she said. Emma gently placed the postnuptial agreement back on the table. "I'll sign it," she repeated. "But only if everyone signs the same disclosure package." Richard frowned. "Disclosure package?" Emma reached into her leather briefcase and placed 6 sealed envelopes on the table. "I believe marriage should protect both people equally. If I'm expected to reveal my finances, then everyone should be transparent." Margaret laughed. "Oh, honey, we have nothing to hide." "Wonderful," Emma replied with a calm smile. "Then this won't take long." Daniel looked at his wife, puzzled. "Emma, what are these?" "My financial disclosures." The family attorney opened the first envelope. Within seconds, his expression changed. He adjusted his glasses, then looked again. "There must be some mistake." Margaret frowned. "What mistake?" The attorney swallowed hard. "This portfolio alone is valued at over $2 billion. The room went completely silent. Richard let out a sarcastic laugh. "Impossible." The attorney slid several certified ownership documents across the table. Every page carried official seals. Every signature had been notarized. Holding companies, commercial real estate, international investments, technology firms, private equity funds. Everything listed one owner, Emma Carter. Margaret's smile disappeared. Daniel stared at the documents in disbelief. You own all of this? Emma nodded softly. I never hid it. I just never used it to define who I am. Richard slammed his hand on the table. If this is true, why pretend to be ordinary? Emma looked directly at him. Because I wanted to know who loved me, before they knew my bank account. The attorney cleared his throat. There's something else. He lifted another document from the folder. This postnuptial agreement is legally meaningless unless both parties fully disclose all assets beforehand. Margaret's face turned pale. So if Mrs. Carter had signed without revealing her assets, the agreement could be challenged. Emma smiled politely. I wasn't protecting my money. I was protecting my marriage. Then she turned toward Daniel. I trusted you. I just wasn't sure your family trusted me. Daniel slowly reached for the postnuptial agreement. Without saying a word, he tore it cleanly in half. The ripping sound echoed across the room. Margaret gasped. Daniel, what are you doing? He looked at his parents with disappointment. The real gold diggers weren't sitting across the table. They were sitting beside me. The silence that followed was heavier than anyone expected. But Emma had one final surprise. The room fell completely silent. Margaret's confident smile disappeared. Richard stared at the financial report again, convinced there had to be some mistake. This can't be real, he whispered. Emma calmly placed another folder on the conference table. I expected questions. Inside were audited financial statements, ownership records, and official documents proving she was the majority owner of Carter Global Holdings. Daniel looked at his wife in shock. You built all of this, and never told me. Emma met his eyes. I never wanted my money to decide who loved me. I wanted to know people for who they really were. Daniel slowly nodded. I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me. I wanted to, Emma replied softly. But after seeing how your parents treated me from the beginning, I kept waiting for the right time. Margaret suddenly stood up. So you've been lying to this family? Emma remained calm. No, I simply chose privacy. There's a difference. Richard cleared his throat. If what these papers say is true. Emma interrupted politely. They are true. She slid one final document across the table. This is the agreement my legal team prepared. Margaret frowned. What agreement? Emma smiled. The fair version of the postnuptial agreement. Richard opened it. Every page protected both spouses equally. Neither person would be left with nothing. Both would be treated with dignity if the marriage ever ended. Daniel looked at Emma with admiration. This is what marriage should look like. Margaret's face turned red. So, you're saying our agreement was unfair? Emma answered without raising her voice. I'm saying it was written to punish one person, not protect two. No one argued. For the first time, Margaret had no comeback. Just then, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Her assistant had sent a message. The board has approved the acquisition. The company is now officially valued at $2.4 billion. Emma quietly locked her phone and slipped it back into her purse. She didn't mention the new valuation. There was no need. The room had already learned the lesson that mattered most. The richest person at the table had been the kindest one all along. Daniel reached for Emma's hand. I'm proud of you. She smiled. I never wanted to impress your family. I only wanted them to respect me. Margaret lowered her eyes for the first time in years. But the biggest surprise was still waiting outside that conference room. As Emma and Daniel stepped out of the conference room, A line of black luxury SUVs pulled up to the entrance. Several sharply dressed executives stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a leather portfolio. The receptionist hurried over. "Ms. Carter, the board members have arrived. They're waiting for you." Margaret froze. "Board members?" One of the executives walked straight to Emma and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman. Congratulations on the successful acquisition. The final paperwork is ready for your signature." Richard's jaw dropped. Daniel looked at Emma with amazement. "So, you're not just an owner." Emma smiled. "I'm the chairwoman." The executives greeted her with respect, while employees passing through the lobby stopped to congratulate her on the company's newest billion-dollar acquisition. Margaret suddenly rushed toward Emma. "Emma, I think we got off on the wrong foot." Emma looked at her calmly. "Did we?" Margaret forced an awkward laugh. "We're family. Families make mistakes." Emma nodded. "They do." Richard quickly added, "Perhaps we should all have dinner tonight. Our treat." Emma couldn't help but notice how quickly their attitude had changed. Just an hour earlier, she had been just a gold digger. Now they wanted to celebrate with her. She turned to Daniel. "Do you remember our first apartment?" He smiled. "The tiny one with the leaking kitchen sink." Emma laughed. "We were happy there, because we had each other," Daniel replied. Emma faced his parents again. "When Daniel and I had almost nothing, your invitations were rare. You questioned my career. You questioned my character. And today, because you discovered my net worth, suddenly I'm worthy of respect." Margaret lowered her head. "I'm sorry." Emma paused for a moment before answering. "I forgive you." Margaret looked relieved. "But forgiveness," Emma continued, "doesn't erase the choices that revealed someone's true character." Richard quietly asked, "Is there anything we can do to make this right?" Emma smiled gently. "Yes. Treat every person with kindness before you know what's in their bank account." Silence filled the lobby. It was the first honest lesson either of them had heard in years. That evening, Daniel wrapped his arm around Emma as they walked home. "I married an incredible woman." Emma smiled. "And I married a man who tore up a postnup instead of tearing down his wife." They both laughed. For the first time in weeks, everything felt peaceful. But 3 days later, Emma received an unexpected phone call. Someone had leaked her billionaire identity to the media. And the person responsible was someone she never expected.